His phone lit up. She saw a name. And in that moment, Christmas died inside her. Have you ever looked at someone you built your whole life with and felt like a stranger was staring back? Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, where true love is never simple and lessons come wrapped in heartbreak, not ribbons. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply you forgot to guard your own heart, this story is for you. If you believe healing sometimes begins with walking away, stay with us. The snow in Charleston hadn't stopped all day. From the windows of the Royce penthouse, the world looked hand-painted, cobblestone. Streets below lined with garlands, every gas lamp flickering against the velvet sky. Outside, everything whispered tradition. Inside, something was breaking. Seraphine stood barefoot on the heated marble floor, brushing olive oil across the lamb roast. She'd added rosemary, just the way Calder liked it. The scent filled the kitchen, warm, herby, patient. She glanced at the clock. 6:48 p.m. He said he'd be home by 7. The candles were already lit. The table already set. The linen napkins were wrapped in thin gold rings she'd picked out during last year's post to Christmas sale. Everything looked beautiful, except her face in the mirror. Seraphine Miles Royce didn't wear much makeup anymore. Not because she stopped caring, but because she learned that when your marriage starts to vanish, mascara won't hold it together. She wore the navy satin dress Calder always paused to admire. She wore it tonight, not to seduce, but to remind him. Remind him of what they had, of what he promised, of what she was about to tell him. Because tonight wasn't just any night. It was Christmas Eve, and she was pregnant. 8 weeks. Confirmed. After 2 miscarriages and a year of silence on the topic, Seraphine had stopped hoping. Until now. But she wasn't naive. Hope had sharp edges, especially when the man you love stops looking at you like he used to. She had noticed the changes. 3 months ago, Calder began traveling more. Shorter goodbyes. Colder returns. He still brought gifts. Still texted. But nothing felt real anymore. He changed his phone password. He forgot their anniversary dinner. He stopped reaching for her hand at night. And then came the moment she couldn't unsee. A faint floral perfume on his scarf. Not hers. Not familiar. Still, she said nothing. People praised her patience, her grace, her stillness. But stillness and silence weren't always peace. Sometimes they were preparation. She checked the time again. 7:14 p.m. No text, no call. She didn't panic. She reheated the roast gently and refolded the napkins. She turned on the fireplace and dimmed the lights. Then, she played the same jazz Christmas album they used the first year they moved in together, back when everything felt fragile and full of magic. Seraphine sat by the tree. She didn't cry. She waited, not because she expected a miracle, but because she wanted to know, truly know, if tonight would confirm what her heart already suspected. By the time the elevator dinged at 8:42 p.m., the wine had gone warm. Calder stepped in, his coat dusted with snow, his scarf still navy, his hair damp. He looked like a man returning home, but the way he hesitated by the door said otherwise. "I didn't think you'd still be up," he said, voice neutral. Seraphine stood from the chair. "We had plans." He blinked. Something came up. "Work." She nodded, no tone in her voice, no guilt in his. He hung his coat, slipped off his shoes, walked toward the table. Dinner was waiting, everything still warm. She poured his favorite wine, then hers, sat down across from him. He began to talk about the market, a client issue, flights. She nodded in the right places, asked about his mother. He answered in pieces. Seraphine smiled politely, but she watched closely, not his words, his eyes. And somewhere between his second sip of wine and the fourth sentence about a delayed investor, Seraphine stopped hoping. She didn't know why yet, but something in her chest folded in on itself. She felt it, and what came next would prove it. The lamb was tender, the wine poured smooth, but Seraphine didn't taste a thing. Her mind wandered as Calder's voice filled the room with talk about contracts and meetings. He didn't notice that she hadn't touched her fork in over 10 minutes. His tie was still on. His shirt had a faint crease. His scent, woodsy with a trace of spice, felt familiar. But tonight, nothing about him did. He didn't ask how her day was. He didn't notice the softness in her eyes when she looked at him. He didn't see the way her hand hovered near her belly. She was going to tell him. After dessert, after a dance in the living room, after he kissed her like a man who remembered her body better than his schedule. But none of that came. Instead, it was a sound, a light buzz, then a soft glow. His phone, face up on the table, lit up. 10:04 p.m. Seraphine's eyes flicked to it, by accident, a habit. But what she read burned the air between them. Still wearing the scent you like. Wish you'd stayed. Kaya. No password required to feel betrayal. No explanation needed. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. She picked up her napkin and slowly folded it on her plate. Then she rose and walked to the fireplace. On the mantel were 2 gifts, both labeled with Calder's name in silver ink. She picked the smaller one, walked back, set it gently in front of him. His fork paused mid-bite. "What's this?" he asked, his voice still coated in oblivion. "Open it," she said, her tone quiet and clean. He set down the fork, unwrapped the linen, opened the black box. Inside was a photo album, hand-bound, leather cover, gold-trimmed pages. He flipped through slowly. Their honeymoon in Naples, their first apartment lease, the ultrasound from their first loss, a letter he wrote her on their 2nd anniversary, "You are my only forever." Then, the last page, dated December 16th, a new ultrasound, 8 weeks. She had taped it gently. Below it, a note, hope. One more time. Calder stared at it. His mouth parted, but no sound came. "Seraphine." She raised her hand, delicate, calm, final. "I don't want apologies tonight," she said, voice steady. "Not with lies still on your lips." He sat back, stunned, the phone still lit beside his wine glass. "She's just—" "Don't," she cut in. "Don't turn her into just anything. Not when you've turned me into nothing." Her words didn't shake. They landed like a quiet gavel. "You changed your password. You missed my appointments. You gave me silence when I needed a shoulder. And now—" She looked down at her stomach, then back at him. "You missed this baby's first heartbeat because you were with someone else." Tears didn't come. Not yet. They weren't ready. She wasn't broken. She was finished. "You took my heart," she whispered. "And you gave it competition." Calder stood up, reaching across the table. "I didn't mean to—" "To what?" she asked. "Replace me. Forget me. Or hope I'd never find out." He took a step forward, slower this time. "I never stopped loving you." Seraphine looked him in the eyes. That's not what it felt like. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She turned, walked away, up the stairs, down the hall. She opened the guest room door and slipped inside. She didn't pack. She didn't scream. She didn't crumble. She lay on the bed, still in her navy dress, and stared at the ceiling until sleep came and took her away. Calder sat outside the guest room for over 2 hours. He never knocked, never begged. He sat there holding the album, staring at the page where his future had been quietly written. And the woman who carried it no longer trusted him to protect it. By morning, she was gone. Not with drama, not with chaos, but with dignity, and with the life she now carried alone. Have you ever stayed quiet? Not because you were weak, but because your silence said everything. If this part of Seraphine's story hit close to home, tell us in the comments. Would you have left that night? Or waited for the truth to fall apart on its own? Tap like if you believe silence can be louder than betrayal. And don't forget to subscribe, because Mr. Charles Stories is where every heartbreak comes with a lesson. The sun came late that Christmas morning. Light crawled slowly over Charleston's rooftops, filtered through frost-laced windows. and touched the Royce penthouse like a stranger, unsure if it belonged there. The bed in the master bedroom was undisturbed. The sheets on Seraphine's side were still smooth, untouched since the night before. Calder lay alone, fully dressed, on the edge of the mattress, eyes open, still in last night's shirt. The photo album rested against his chest. He hadn't slept. The message, the name, the ultrasound, each image looped in his mind like punishment. But no version gave him peace. He could still smell her scent in the hallway, a blend of almond oil and something subtle, like vanilla and salt. The scent had followed him for years, through cities, offices, parties, and Sunday mornings. Now, it was fading. The door to the guest room had been left ajar. He stepped into it slowly, as if breaking a rule. The bed was empty, sheets pulled, curtains parted, her navy dress folded neatly over the footboard. No note, no sound, only stillness. She had left, and for the first time in 5 years, Calder didn't know where she went. Downstairs, breakfast sat untouched on the granite island. The cinnamon rolls she used to bake from scratch, still warm at dawn, had never made it out of the oven this time. The coffee pot was full, 2 mugs beside it, only one used. She had moved carefully, not to disturb him, not to wake him, but more importantly, not to give him the satisfaction of confrontation, because Seraphine wasn't a woman who exploded. She imploded, and he had learned, too late, that quiet departures cut deeper than screamed accusations. He wandered through the house like a ghost. Every room had her fingerprint. The piano in the sitting room still held the sheet music she'd been trying to learn. The candle on the fireplace mantel was half burned, her favorite scent, cedarwood and fig. In the laundry room, her robe was still hanging, sash tied tight, as if waiting to be worn again. But she was gone. He checked the garage. Her SUV was missing. He opened the closet, half empty. Not a full exit, but not an accident either. She had taken what she needed, and left behind what she didn't trust him with. He walked back to the kitchen and sat at the dining table. There was no music now, no scent of rosemary, no voice humming to herself as she loaded the dishwasher, just him and the silence. And silence, for the first time in years, felt earned. By 9 a.m. his mother called. He didn't answer. At 10:10 a.m. Kaya texted, "Are we okay? Haven't heard from you." He stared at the screen, deleted the thread, tossed the phone across the room. It hit the couch and slid to the floor, screen down. He looked around and saw the home Seraphine had built, not just decorated. Every detail reflected care, books stacked by themes, cookware organized by frequency of use, pillows fluffed, not for aesthetics, but for comfort, holiday cards from friends displayed on handmade ribbon lines above the windows. She had given the penthouse life, and without her, it was a very expensive tomb. He reached for the photo album again, turned to the last page, that ultrasound image, 8 weeks. He remembered the first time she handed him one, 2 years ago, trembling, hopeful. They'd lost that one, and another a year later. Each time she carried the grief differently, quiet, with grace, with swollen eyes and hidden sobs behind pantry doors. He had supported her. He thought he had. But looking at this new ultrasound, he realized support wasn't presence, and he hadn't truly been present in months. He'd been elsewhere, distracted, performing, letting praise from outside the home substitute for purpose inside it. The thing about Seraphine was that she never asked for much. She didn't demand flowers. She didn't post anniversary photos. She didn't even interrupt when he worked late. She waited, hoped, believed, until the believing felt like betrayal to herself. And now, he had no idea where she went. No address, no signal, just silence. He opened his laptop, typed her name into his shared location history. Disabled, of course. He checked the joint savings account. She had withdrawn a portion, not all. Practical, measured, typical Seraphine. No spite, no revenge, just boundaries. He sat back in the chair, exhaled, and asked himself the question he'd been avoiding. Why did I do it? Why Kaya? Why any of it? Not for love. Not for passion. Not for anything permanent. Kaya made him feel admired, seen, like a man whose time was valuable, like someone worthy of flattery after long hours and cold boardrooms. But Kaya didn't know the smell of his cologne when he changed brands. She didn't know his tells when he lied. She didn't know he hated mustard on his sandwiches, no matter what restaurant menus claimed. Seraphine knew all that, and he had exchanged depth for distraction. Now, he was paying for it, with interest. The doorbell rang at noon. He opened it, expecting a courier or maybe one of his staff. It was her sister, Mireille. Brown coat, scarf up to her chin, eyes unreadable. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. "She's with me," Mireille said simply. Calder nodded, relieved and crushed at once. "She's safe?" "She's pregnant, Calder." "Of course she's not safe," she replied, brushing past him. She looked around, arms folded. Was the other woman worth it? He didn't answer. She pointed at the tree. "She spent all week decorating that. Told me she wanted Vienna's first Christmas to be filled with color. Even if she hadn't told you yet." "Vienna." Mireille's eyes narrowed. "Yes, that's the name she picked, and if you're lucky, someday you'll hear her say it." He swallowed hard. Mireille walked to the door, paused, and turned. "She doesn't hate you, not even close. That's what hurts the most." Then, she left, and Calder stood in the doorway, alone again. His breath visible in the cold hallway. The scent of rosemary long gone. He had chosen wrong. Repeatedly, silently, cowardly. Now, silence was all he had left. And Seraphine. She had finally chosen herself. The coastal town of Beaufort was only 2 hours from Charleston, but to Seraphine, it felt like a different country. The morning she left, she didn't take much, just her ID, a single suitcase, and the new prenatal vitamins she hadn't opened yet. She needed quiet, but not the kind Calder gave her. She needed space, but not the kind that widened gaps between people. She needed dignity without performance, peace without pretense. Mireille's lake house sat low on a hill just outside town. It faced the water, framed by pines and old oaks draped in Spanish moss. It smelled like wood smoke and rain-soaked cedar, and Seraphine breathed for the first time in months when she stepped inside. Mireille didn't ask questions. She opened the guest room, brought tea, and left her alone. The rest, Seraphine would unfold in time. She sat by the window that evening, curled into the wide armchair with a wool blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She watched ducks trail across the lake, the sun dipping behind the tree line in slow, syrupy motion. Her hand rested on her belly. It still didn't show, but the weight was there. She had felt it that morning. Not a flutter, just a thrum, a reminder. She wasn't alone, and that truth steadied her more than anything else. For years, Seraphine thought marriage meant holding on no matter what. Her mother taught her to endure. Her aunties taught her to stay. Her church praised the quiet woman who forgives without questioning, waits without complaint. But Seraphine had waited long enough. She waited through missed calls, missed appointments, and empty kisses. She waited through stomach pain in the clinic lobby, alone. She waited while Calder fed his ego on admiration from someone else's mouth. And when the wait ended, it didn't end with fire. It ended with a message on his phone. One sentence that made her womb feel colder than the snow outside. She didn't need proof. She didn't need confrontation. She needed herself back. And sitting there, in that quiet chair, she realized she had done what too many women are afraid to do. She left before she was erased. The next morning, Mireille brought breakfast, warm oats with blueberries, honey, and almond milk. "You slept?" she asked. Seraphine nodded. For the first time in weeks, Mireille didn't press further, but later that afternoon, she returned with a folder. Inside were brochures, birthing centers, OBGYN referrals, nutritionists and support groups in the area. "You can stay here," she said. "As long as you want." Seraphine touched the edge of the folder. "I don't know what I'm doing. Mireille looked her dead in the eyes. You're choosing peace. That's what you're doing. For 3 days, Seraphine didn't check her phone. She deleted every message preview without opening them. Calder had only texted twice. He hadn't called. She told herself she didn't care. But some nights, when the house went still, she thought about the way he used to hold her wrist gently in bed, like he needed to feel her pulse to sleep. She didn't miss him. She missed the version of him that never really stayed. On day 4, she opened her journal and wrote, "He wasn't cruel, he was careless, and sometimes that's worse." Then she underlined it. Twice. At her first appointment in Beaufort, the nurse smiled warmly, took her blood pressure, checked her chart. "You've been through a lot," she said softly, reviewing the notes Seraphine brought from Charleston. Seraphine nodded. "You're strong." Seraphine looked down at her hands. "I didn't feel strong when I left. But you left, and that was enough." That night, she began rearranging the guest room. She moved the mirror near the window, laid out a yoga mat, started reading a book on single motherhood. Every page reminded her that this life growing inside her was hers, not Calder's, not the marriage's, not a tool to fix what was already broken. It was a beginning. A week later, Mireille found her humming in the kitchen while slicing pears. "You seem lighter," she said. "I'm not," Seraphine answered. "I'm just not carrying what's not mine anymore." On the 10th night, her phone buzzed. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again. She picked it up. Thumb hovered over the screen. A message preview from Calder. "I saw the album again today. I deserved everything you didn't say." She didn't reply. She put the phone down, looked at the dark lake outside, and whispered one word: Vienna. She was already learning how to love someone without needing permission to protect them. It had been 11 days since Seraphine left. The penthouse still looked the same. Immaculate floors, curated art, spotless glass, but something in the air felt stale, not from dust or neglect, from absence. Calder stood in front of the mirror in his bathroom, the same one where Seraphine used to lean against the counter while brushing her hair. He stared at himself, not to fix his tie, not to admire anything, but to ask a question he hadn't dared ask yet. Why did you become someone she had to walk away from? He looked the same on the outside. Sharp jawline, clear eyes, no weight gain, no grey hairs. But inside, everything was cracked. He had always assumed betrayal looked like fire, explosive, dramatic, loud. He never imagined it would look like 2 unspoken words on Christmas Eve. A glance at a screen, a folded napkin, a box handed across the table. She didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't even curse him. And that's what made it worse. Because Seraphine didn't leave in anger, she left in certainty. She didn't want revenge, she wanted herself back. His therapist, a man named Dr. Lewin, leaned forward slightly in the second session. "She left quietly," Calder said. "Didn't even slam the door." "That's a sign of something," Dr. Lewin replied. "Of what?" "Finality." Calder looked down. His voice softened. "I thought I had more time." "What stopped you from choosing her sooner?" He didn't know how to answer. Not really. "It wasn't that I didn't love her," Calder said. I stopped showing up." Dr. Lewin nodded. "Love isn't a feeling, Calder. It's presence, it's effort, especially when you're tired, especially when it's inconvenient." Calder inhaled through his nose, long, heavy. "She used to ask me if I needed anything, even on days I didn't deserve it. And what did you give her in return? Stability, money, a nice life." Dr. Lewin didn't blink. "But not you." That night, Calder sat on the couch and opened his journal. He flipped to a blank page and wrote, "I built a house she couldn't breathe in." Then, another line. "I chose admiration over intimacy, control over connection, applause over accountability." He stared at the page. It didn't feel poetic. It felt overdue. The days passed differently now. No one reminded him to eat. No one told him he looked tired. No one asked how his meeting went. For the first time, he noticed how empty it felt to be a man with influence in every room except his own living room. He thought about the baby, Vianna. The name sat in his chest like something sacred and unreachable. He imagined what she looked like. Would she have Seraphine's eyes? Would she wrinkle her nose when frustrated? Would she ever know him at all? He wasn't sure, and he wasn't entitled to be. At work, his assistant noticed he no longer stayed late. He answered emails later, moved slower, asked questions about things he used to dismiss. During one staff meeting, he asked everyone to share one thing they needed that week, professionally or personally. The team went quiet. It wasn't like him. When one intern hesitated, Calder said, "We all carry things. Don't pretend you don't. I won't pretend either." Afterward, he sat in his office and scrolled through his photo library. Every memory with Seraphine hit differently now. He saw her in hotel lobbies, waiting patiently. In the kitchen, dancing barefoot to 90 seconds R&B. In the airport, tying her scarf while yawning after red eyes. He noticed things he never saw before. The exhaustion in her eyes. The pause before she spoke. The way she slowly stopped taking pictures of herself. He messaged Mireille, "Thank you for telling me she's safe." No response. 3 hours later, he typed again. Tell her. She was right. About everything. Still nothing. But he didn't delete the messages. This time, he didn't need a reply. He needed to say the truth out loud, even if only to himself. He didn't speak to Kaya again. He didn't need closure, because it was never about her. It was about the version of himself that let validation become more valuable than loyalty. It was about the man who forgot that love isn't passive, that a home isn't built on presence alone, it's built on participation. He began making changes, not to win Seraphine back, but to become the kind of father Vianna might want to know. He cancelled the Miami conference, hired a COO to reduce his travel load, returned calls from his cousins he hadn't spoken to in years. He cleaned out his guest room, replaced the sterile decor with soft furniture and books, just in case. A maybe someday. He wasn't rushing fate. But he wanted to be ready if it ever knocked. The therapist asked, "What scares you more, losing Seraphine permanently or facing the part of yourself that let it happen?" Calder stared at the ceiling. "Same answer," he finally said. And on the 12th day since she left, he went to the guest bathroom, the one she used every night. He found her hairbrush, 3 strands still woven in the bristles. He held it like a lifeline. It smelled like almond oil. And this time, he wept. Seraphine stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest room at Mireille's lake house. Her sweatshirt hung loose, but she could feel the small swell underneath. It wasn't visible to others yet, but to her, it was already everything. This time, she didn't hide her palm over her belly. She pressed it there gently, protective, firm. This was hers, and it was safe now. Later that afternoon, she sat across from Dr. Landis, the therapist Mireille recommended. Her office smelled like citrus and pine. 2 candles flickered softly on a corner table, and the windows opened wide toward the lake. "So," Dr. Landis said, "what brings you here, Seraphine?" She thought for a moment. Not how to explain it, but how to start. "I'm not here to talk about the man I left," she said. "I'm here to talk about the woman who stayed too long." She didn't cry during that first session. She didn't fumble or minimize. She spoke clearly about the waiting, the miscarriages, the silence in their home, the long nights, where she stared at the ceiling, wondering if her husband had simply forgotten who she was. Dr. Landis didn't interrupt. She didn't offer sympathy, only space. "I didn't leave because he cheated," Seraphine said. "I left because I was disappearing, quietly, daily, and nobody noticed." That night, Seraphine wrote 3 rules on a piece of paper and pinned them above her bed. 1. No one gets to define my worth except me. 2. Peace is more valuable than loyalty to people who don't show up. 3. This child will grow up knowing strength isn't noise, it's truth. The days found a rhythm. She attended prenatal yoga twice a week, cooked with Mireille on weekends, started writing again, not just in a journal, real writing, personal essays, reflections, stories about women who didn't burn down their lives but quietly rebuilt them when no one was watching. Each page was a brick in her foundation. One afternoon at the park near the waterfront, Seraphine sat on a bench with her notebook in her lap. A little girl with coiled hair and bright eyes skipped by, holding her father's hand. The man knelt beside her, tying her shoelace while the girl rattled off something about dolphins and waffles. He smiled the whole time, present, calm, engaged. Seraphine looked away. She wasn't bitter, but she was honest. That kind of fathering hadn't existed in her home. Calder had talked about children like stock options, planned, calculated, budgeted, not lived, not wanted for their own sake. Now, it wasn't about what he had failed to give her. It was about what she would never again allow herself to settle for. She made a decision that evening. A bold one. She would not raise Vienna in Charleston. Too many shadows there. Too many hallways that still smelled like grief. Beaufort had become a soft place to land, but it wasn't forever either. She needed roots, not just for her, but for her daughter. A place where she could teach her about resilience, without pain being the first teacher. A place where Seraphine could be both mother and woman, and never have to apologize for either. By the end of the week, she had found a modest house to rent on the east side of town. Single story, 2 bedrooms, a backyard that caught the morning sun. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt right. "I need this," she told Mireille as they signed the papers. "You've earned it," Mireille replied. That night, she unpacked slowly, alone, room by room. Each drawer filled with intention, each cupboard organized with peace in mind. No arguing voices, no half-empty wine glasses, no guilt clinging to the corners, just soft music, steamed rice, a cup of tea by the sink, and the sound of wind slipping through open windows. She bought a small crib the following morning, not because she was ready, but because readiness had never meant perfection. It meant commitment. And she was committed to showing up, even if that meant waking up at 3 a.m. with worry, even if that meant loneliness, even if that meant answering her child's questions one day about where Daddy was, and answering them with honesty, not bitterness. The next time Calder texted, she read it, not asking for a reply, just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for one thing. For all of it, she didn't reply, not because she hated him, but because she had nothing left to explain. She joined a local moms group. Most of the women were older, married, experienced, but they welcomed her. One, a woman named Colette, gave her a handmade baby blanket. "You're going to be amazing," she said, "because you already know how to love with boundaries." Seraphine smiled softly. "I'm still learning." "We all are," Colette replied, "every day." 2 weeks later, Seraphine met with a midwife named Frances, who specialized in emotional trauma support. During their session, Frances asked her, "What kind of mother do you want to be?" Seraphine took her time answering, "I want to be the kind of mother who teaches her daughter that leaving is not failure." Frances wrote that down, word for word. "Say it again," she said. "I want to be the kind of mother who teaches her daughter that leaving is not failure." That night, Seraphine dreamed of Vienna, not as an infant, but as a child, curly-haired, sunlit, dancing in the backyard to a record player humming through open windows. In the dream, Vienna looked up and asked, "Mama, why don't we live with Daddy?" And Seraphine knelt beside her and said, "Because I wanted you to grow up with quiet mornings, not questions." Vienna nodded, then smiled. When she woke up, Seraphine was crying, but not from sadness, from relief, from clarity, from knowing she didn't need to be rescued. She just needed to stay free. The first time Calder Royce ever told the truth in a room full of men, no one clapped. It was 2 weeks after Christmas, during a quarterly off-site with his senior partners. The room was all glass, 40 stories above the Charleston skyline, stocked with catered espresso and leather chairs. He had planned to review fourth-quarter figures. He had prepared a slide deck. He even wore the blue tie Seraphine gave him 3 anniversaries ago. But none of that mattered, because something inside him had shifted, and this time he didn't silence it. When it was his turn to speak, he stood in front of the long table and stared at the glass, behind the heads of the men he'd mentored, outperformed, and sometimes quietly envied. "I've built a reputation here," he began. "We all have." Everyone nodded. "But mine cost me something I didn't notice until it was gone." A few eyebrows lifted. "I want to talk about presence. Not just as executives, but as men." Now they really listened. I missed my wife's pregnancy announcement, not because I was out of town, but because I was in the same room and somewhere else entirely. Silence. No one moved. He continued. "I thought success would earn me peace. It didn't. It gave me noise I confused with purpose. Someone cleared their throat." Calder ignored it. "We measure wins with numbers, but no spreadsheet tells you when your partner stops looking you in the eyes, or when your child's heartbeat is heard without you." He let that settle. "I lost something that can't be replaced. And now I'm choosing to be someone different. If that makes me slower, so be it." He picked up his clicker. Didn't use it. Set it down. "That's all I have today." Then he sat. No applause. No rebuke. Just stillness. And in that stillness, he felt more powerful than he had in years. That evening, he walked to his car alone. No one followed. No one texted afterward. But one junior partner emailed him a few hours later. "I haven't been home for dinner in 6 weeks. Your talk wrecked me." "Thank you." Calder replied. "Go home tonight. Nothing you close will compare to what you'll lose if you don't." Back at the penthouse, he turned on the lights slowly. Everything still felt untouched. But something in him wasn't. He walked to the kitchen and opened the cabinet above the fridge. The one Seraphine kept for the things she didn't use daily, quiet things. Candle trimmers, linen spray, a handwritten list of spices. He pulled the list out. Coriander, fennel, tarragon. She always kept it organized by occasion. A holiday column, a summer dinner column, one labeled, "When I'm missing someone but don't want to talk." The ingredients listed were comforting: vanilla, cardamom, star anise, things that warmed the body without numbing the heart. She cooked with intention. He consumed without noticing. That was over now. He started therapy twice a week. Dr. Lewin stopped asking about the affair. He already knew the reasons. Now, they talked about the man behind the armor. "You confuse being needed with being valued," Dr. Lewin told him. Calder frowned. "Isn't it the same?" "No," he said. "Being needed is about utility. Being valued is about presence." Calder sat back. "My father was never present. And you?" He hesitated. "I thought I was—" "You showed up. You paid bills. You stood beside her." "Doctor," Lewin paused. "But did she ever feel held?" That question followed him into every room afterward. When he ordered coffee, he tipped extra. When his doorman greeted him, he stopped to ask how his mother was. When a former intern reached out on LinkedIn, he offered mentorship instead of a brush-off. It wasn't a redemption tour. It was unlearning. Unlearning success as a shield. Unlearning silence as dignity. Unlearning the idea that love tolerated neglect. One evening, he walked to the nursery he never finished. The door had been closed for months. He opened it slowly. Inside, the walls were still bare. Just a single rocking chair in the corner. One unopened box of alphabet prints. He sat in the chair, closed his eyes, and whispered, "I'm sorry I wasn't the man your mother needed me to be." The article showed up on Seraphine's phone during a quiet Sunday afternoon. She had just come in from a walk, cheeks still kissed pink from the breeze, her steps lighter than they'd been in weeks. She was halfway through slicing strawberries when a news alert slid across the top of her screen. Investor Calder Royce speaks out. "Success cost me a life I can't buy." Back Charleston Ledger or feature interview. She didn't click it. Not at first, but her fingers paused on the cutting board. The knife rested quietly beside the fruit. His name still did something to her chest. Not pain, not longing. Just tension. A familiar reminder that even though she had left the story hadn't quite left her. Later that evening, when the house was quiet and the moon hung low, over the lake, she sat on the couch and pulled out her phone again. She clicked the article. The first line hit harder than she expected. "I missed the most important heartbeat of my life because I was too busy listening to applause." She blinked. It was a quote. Direct, honest, too specific to ignore. She scrolled. No bitterness, no blame, just ownership. He admitted to emotional neglect, to missing her signals, to thinking that showing up physically counted as presence. He didn't mention her name, didn't describe her, didn't make himself look better. He made himself look real. She set the phone down slowly. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. Not because she wanted to go back, but because this version of him, if real, was the man she had prayed would emerge while she was still by his side. But he hadn't, and that mattered. Healing after damage is noble. Healing before you damage someone else, that's wisdom. Still, she respected what he had done, not the press, but the courage it took to admit failure publicly. It didn't change the past, but it validated her truth. The next morning, Colette from the moms group stopped her outside the grocery store. "You doing okay?" she asked. "I think so," Seraphine replied. Colette hesitated. "I saw the article. I didn't want to bring it up unless you did." Seraphine nodded. "I read it. I thought it was human." Seraphine gave a faint smile. "It was. And it reminded me I made the right choice." Colette leaned in. "That's the beauty of leaving before bitterness hardens you. You get to watch growth from a safe distance." Seraphine drove home that day feeling steady. She didn't call Calder, didn't text, didn't send a screenshot to her sister. She just put on a record, cleaned the kitchen, and folded baby clothes in silence. She even found herself humming. That's how she knew she wasn't angry. But that night, after dinner, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Voicemail. She hesitated, then hit play. "I didn't write that article for a headline. I wrote it because it was true. Whether you ever talk to me again or not, I wanted Vianna to grow up in a world where her father tells the truth. That starts now. That starts with this. No begging, no manipulation, just clarity." She sat there for a long time, phone still in her hand. Not moved, not melting, but seen. She opened her journal and wrote, "Forgiveness isn't always followed by a reunion. Sometimes it just releases the weight." She closed the journal, lit a candle, whispered, "Thank you," to the room, not to him, but to the strength that carried her this far. She didn't know what came next, but for the first time since she left, she wasn't afraid of finding out. Seraphine didn't reply to the voicemail. She didn't need to. Instead, she let time work. She let silence protect her peace, and she let her decisions, not her emotions, guide what came next. 2 weeks passed before she spoke to him. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a long message. It was a line. Simple, intentional, clear. "If you're serious about showing up for Vianna, we can talk. But I set the rules now. No greeting, no softness, no room for negotiation." She didn't need an apology anymore. She needed structure. She needed proof. And if Calder truly meant everything he'd written and said, he wouldn't try to talk her out of her boundaries. He'd follow them. The response came 8 hours later. "Understood. I'll follow your lead." They met the next day at a coffee shop, halfway between Charleston and Beaufort. Neutral ground. Seraphine arrived early. Chose a table in the corner. Faced the door. She wore black pants, a beige sweater, and her hair in a loose bun. No makeup, no effort to impress. She wasn't there to reopen anything. She was there to protect what was already growing inside her. When Calder walked in, he looked different. Not physically, but energetically. No confident swagger, no polished charm. He looked still, and that was new. He approached the table slowly. "Thank you for coming," he said. Seraphine nodded. "Sit." He sat. They didn't talk about the weather or the past. or how it felt to see each other again. She got straight to it. "If you're here for access," she said, "you'll need to earn presents." He nodded. "I understand." She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. He opened it. Inside were 5 bullet points. 1. No overnight visits. Until she knows your name, you're not sleeping under the same roof. 2. No questions about us. This isn't about a second chance. This is about you being her father, not my husband. 3. No social media. She's not a moment for likes. Citiere. No half effort. If you miss anything you agree to once, you'll lose all access. No warnings. Pet. No secrets. She will grow up with clarity, even if the truth is uncomfortable. He folded the paper, put it in his jacket pocket. "I agree to everything." She studied him. "You didn't flinch. I've already lost too much to bargain now." They sat in silence for a beat. Calder reached for his cup. "I brought something," he said. She didn't reach for it. "I'm not here for gifts." "It's not a gift. It's a record." He slid a notebook across the table. Spiral bound. Handwritten. "Every day since Christmas, I've written to her. Not to you. Not to get you back. To her." Seraphine kept her hands folded. "Page 1, he said, starts with the sentence, 'Your mother is the strongest person I've ever met.'" She didn't open the notebook. Not yet. But she didn't push it back either. That was enough. After the meeting, she drove home with the notebook on the passenger seat. She didn't cry, didn't smile. She felt something new. Control. Not to hurt him, but to protect her daughter. That night, Seraphine stood in Vianna's room, still unfinished, still quiet, and opened the notebook. The first page was neatly written. No edits, no scribbles. She read 5 pages before closing it, and for the first time since she left, she allowed herself to imagine something fragile, a future with boundaries, where he showed up, but she stayed whole. It was a Thursday afternoon when Calder met Vianna for the first time. Seraphine chose the location, a small public park with a gated play area, benches near, the walking trail, and trees tall enough to give shade without crowding the sky. She didn't tell Vianna anything special, just that someone was coming to visit, someone new. At 3 years old, Vianna didn't ask for details. She was too curious about the world to cling to one answer. Calder arrived early. He didn't wear cologne, didn't bring toys, didn't overdress. Just a navy hoodie, dark jeans, and a pair of clean sneakers that Seraphine recognized. He only wore them when he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He stood by the entrance gate until Seraphine gave a nod. Only then did he walk in. Vianna was crouched in the sandbox, fully invested in building a lopsided castle. Her curls framed her face, and she wore a lavender jacket that made her cheeks look brighter. Seraphine stayed seated on the bench, close enough to interfere if needed, far enough to let it unfold. Calder crouched beside the sandbox. "Hi there," he said softly. Vianna didn't look up. She scooped sand, patted it down, and said, "You can help if you don't mess it up." Calder smiled. "I'll follow your lead." For 10 minutes, they worked in silence. He didn't try to charm her, didn't talk too much, didn't touch anything she hadn't approved. Eventually, she handed him a plastic mold. "Make a turtle," she said. He tried, failed, tried again. Vianna giggled. "You're not good at this." He nodded. "I'm still learning." Seraphine watched from the bench, arms folded. She wasn't moved by the scene. She didn't need it to be sweet. She needed it to be real. And Calder wasn't performing. He was simply present. And that was more than she'd ever seen before. When Vianna got bored of the sand, she pulled Calder toward the swings. "Push me," she said. He hesitated, looked at Seraphine for permission. She nodded once. He placed his hands on the swing chains, gentle but firm, and gave her a light push. She squealed. He laughed, and something inside Seraphine's chest ached, not from pain, but from unfamiliarity. This was what it could have looked like, if the timing had been different, if the man he is now showed up sooner. But she didn't entertain regrets. Not anymore. After 30 minutes, Vianna ran toward the monkey bars, distracted by another child's bubble wand. Calder walked back to the bench, sat. She's amazing, he said. She's mine, Seraphine replied. Calder nodded. Thank you for letting me meet her. I didn't do it for you. I know. They sat in silence. A bird landed nearby. A boy tripped and cried. A parent offered wipes and apologies. Life moved on. But something quiet had shifted between them. Not reconciliation, not reunion. Just function. Coexistence. It was more than Seraphine expected, and exactly what Vianna needed. Before they left, Vianna ran up to Calder. Next time, bring snacks. He smiled. Yes, ma'am. Then she ran back to Seraphine and grabbed her hand. Bye, she shouted over her shoulder. Calder waved but said nothing. Not because he had no words, but because the moment didn't need them. On the drive home, Vianna dozed off in her car seat. Seraphine glanced at her through the rearview mirror. She had Calder's jaw, Seraphine's eyes, and a whole spirit of her own. She whispered, "We're okay, baby girl. We're okay." That night, she texted Calder one line. She asked about you at bedtime. His reply came 5 minutes later. What did she say? She said you try too hard, but you're better than the turtle. Calder's response, she's not wrong. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you once loved, not to punish them, but to protect your peace? If this chapter reminded you that forgiveness and access are two different things, let us know in the comments. Would you have let Calder back in? Or kept the door shut? Tap the like button if you believe consistency matters more than apology, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, where second chances don't erase first lessons. Spring arrived quietly. It didn't announce itself in grand ways, not in Beaufort. Here, the change came in softer sunrises, in the way the wind stopped biting, and in how. Vianna no longer needed her puffy jacket when Seraphine buckled her into the car seat. With the season came something Seraphine hadn't realized she missed. Rhythm, not routine, not schedule, but emotional rhythm. A pace where nothing felt rushed. No one raised voices. No one overpromised. Just days unfolding in calm, predictable beats. Calder kept showing up. Every Saturday, at the same time, he pulled up outside Seraphine's house and waited in his car until Vianna ran. Out the door in her pink sneakers, clutching a crayon drawing or a stuffed toy she insisted he had to meet. He never honked, never rushed her, never asked to come inside. Sometimes they went to the museum, sometimes to the bookshop cafe. Once, they spent an entire hour making pancakes out of sand in the backyard. While Vianna gave them names like Professor Syrup and Mrs. Butterbury, he didn't miss a single visit. And he never brought Kaya's name up, not once. One Saturday morning, as Seraphine adjusted Vianna's jacket, the little girl asked, "Is he my friend or my dad?" Seraphine paused, then crouched beside her and said, "He's your dad, but he's also someone who's learning how to be your friend." Vianna nodded, satisfied with the honesty. She didn't ask for more, and Seraphine didn't complicate it. After one of their park days, Calder returned with Vianna asleep in the back seat. Instead of texting, he knocked gently on Seraphine's door. "She knocked out in the car," he said when she opened it. "Didn't even make it to the final page of the book." Seraphine stepped outside. The sun was low, gold against the trees. "She usually does after swings," she said. They stood beside the car. Calder looked at his daughter. Her curls flared out on the seatbelt. Her lips slightly parted in sleep. "I didn't know I could love someone this much without knowing them fully," he said quietly. Seraphine didn't answer, but she didn't turn away either. That evening, she opened the notebook again, the one he'd been adding to and returning every few weeks. The latest entry read, "Today you told me my pancakes looked like sneakers. I said you were the boss. You nodded and told me to try again. I think that's what love is, trying again." She closed the notebook and set it beside Vianna's toy chest. Later that week, Mireille visited. She watched Vianna play on the porch while Seraphine folded laundry. "You're letting him in?" Mireille said casually. Seraphine didn't flinch. I'm letting her be loved. You're still guarded. Of course, I am. Mireille looked at her. And if he keeps showing up? Seraphine shrugged. Then she'll know consistency. That's all I need from him. She didn't need a redo of the past. She didn't want flowers or closure or second attempts at romance. She wanted reliability for Viana, and maybe, eventually, for herself. But she was no longer looking for completion. She was already whole. One evening, Calder texted her after dropping Viana off. Thank you for not making her pay for my mistakes. She stared at the message, then replied, She's not your second chance. She's her own first. He didn't write back. But 2 days later, he showed up with new books for Viana, 2 extra packs of crayons, and a printout of her favorite turtle from the aquarium. Tuesday mornings had become Seraphine's favorite, not because of anything grand, not even because of Viana's dance class, which filled their mornings, with squeaky sneakers and the thud of tiny feet on polished floors. It was the quiet that followed, the stillness that settled in once the house was calm again. Viana usually napped after class, limbs heavy with movement, her cheeks still flushed from laughing too hard. Seraphine used that time to pause, not just to rest, but to listen to herself, and more importantly, to trust herself. That morning, she sat at the dining table with her tea cooling beside her, a notepad open and a single sentence at the top. What do I believe now? For months she had lived in survival. Now, she was rebuilding, and rebuilding required clarity. She began listing truths, not perfect ones, not poetic, just honest. I believe I can leave and still love. I believe loyalty should never cost me my voice. I believe in second chances, for myself first. I believe my daughter deserves parents who are whole, not just present. I believe I am not broken. I was bruised. I believe love is earned, even in blood. I believe I will not raise her to repeat me. She paused. That last line stuck. I will not raise her to repeat me. It wasn't shame. It was accountability. Seraphine hadn't failed by loving Calder. She had almost failed by staying too long in a silence that devoured her spirit. Now, Viana watched everything, listened to everything, learned from everything. So Seraphine chose every move with care. Later that day, Viana woke up early from her nap and climbed into her mother's lap. "Mama," she said, pressing her cheek to Seraphine's chest. "You're soft." Seraphine laughed. "That's what happens when you're a mama." Viana looked up. "When I get soft, can I be a mama too?" Seraphine paused, heart aching from the sweetness. "You can be anything you want," she said. "But soft doesn't make you weak. It makes you kind." Viana blinked slowly. "I want to be kind." "Then you're already becoming the best kind of girl." That night, after Viana fell asleep, Seraphine lit the candles she used during her pregnancies. Lavender and white tea. She sat by the window and pulled out the baby book, not for Viana, for herself, a record of growth she hadn't been keeping. She flipped back to her first note from January. "I don't know what comes next, but I know what I will never accept again." Now she did know what came next. Not a perfect ending, but a steady life. Mireille stopped by the next day with her son Lyle. As the kids played on the floor, Mireille handed Seraphine a brown envelope. "What's this?" Mireille leaned back on the couch. "A speaking invite." Seraphine raised an eyebrow. "You told your story in that essay, remember? The one you published anonymously through that online motherhood group?" Seraphine nodded. She hadn't checked the platform in weeks. Well, it went viral. Over 200,000 views. "A parenting podcast wants you to join a panel next month." Seraphine stared at her. "I'm not a speaker." "You already spoke, Sarah. You just didn't use a microphone." She didn't say yes right away. She never rushed choices anymore. But that night, she opened the site and read the comments under her essay. "I thought I was the only one who left while still loving him. This story saved me from going back to someone who only apologized because I found out. Your strength gave me permission to say no and mean it." Tears came before she could stop them. Not because she was overwhelmed, but because something else was happening. She wasn't healing alone. The next morning, she emailed the podcast team. I'd be honored to speak, but I want it to be about what happens after walking away, not the drama that led to it. They replied within the hour. That's exactly why we want you. When Calder picked up Vianna that Saturday, Seraphine didn't mention the panel. Not yet. But he noticed something different in her posture. You seem taller, he said. She raised a brow. I didn't grow. No, he said, smiling gently. You just finally stopped folding in. She didn't smile back. But she didn't correct him either. That evening, Vianna returned from their outing with a small potted plant. She said you needed something that would grow, Calder explained. Seraphine took the pot. Clay, crooked, hand-painted with purple smudges. On the label, Vianna had written one word in crayon. Try. Seraphine set it on the windowsill, watered it that night, and whispered, Thank you. The venue wasn't large, maybe 50 chairs, a modest stage. Soft lighting, folded programs with paper clips instead of staples. But to Seraphine, it felt like the biggest room she'd ever entered. She sat in the green room of the Charleston Women's Center, waiting for her name to be called. The moderator had prepped them earlier. 3 women, all mothers, each invited, to speak for 10 minutes about reclaiming themselves after private loss. The panel was called, Leaving Quietly, Living Loudly. Seraphine still wasn't sure how she ended up on it. But she knew why she said yes, because someone had to speak for the women who left before the house burned down, who left with a bag, a child, a journal, and nothing else. Outside, Calder parked 3 blocks away and walked in quietly. He wasn't invited. Seraphine hadn't told him, but Mireille had, and she made it clear. She doesn't need you there, she said. But if you go, don't interrupt her shine. He'd nodded. He sat near the back, wore grey, said nothing. When Seraphine stepped on stage, she didn't look for anyone in the crowd. Not even him. The moderator welcomed her. Our next speaker, she said, left quietly. But she's lived with purpose ever since. Please welcome Seraphine Miles. A soft round of applause followed. Polite, encouraging. Seraphine stepped to the mic. She didn't have cue cards. Didn't need them. Her voice was steady from the first word. I didn't leave because he cheated, she began. I left because I couldn't hear myself think anymore. She looked out over the room. There was a time I couldn't get through a day without asking myself, is this how love is supposed to feel? And every time I asked, the answer grew quieter. She paused. I had a daughter growing inside me, and I realized, if I didn't leave now, she would never know what peace looks like. She would learn sacrifice without standard. She would think silence was strength, and I couldn't let her believe that. From the back, Calder sat frozen. He had never heard her speak this much in public, and now, every word hit like a reflection he'd avoided for years. I'm not bitter, she continued. I don't hate the man I left. I honor him for what we had, and I hold him accountable for what he failed to protect. She looked down for a moment. I didn't leave to teach him a lesson. I left to remember mine. She took a breath. I deserve to be present in my own life. My daughter deserves to see me smile with both my eyes, not just my mouth. She deserves a father who shows up, not one who performs. Seraphine's voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. It simply landed. 10 minutes passed. No one moved. When she stepped back from the mic, the applause came, not loud, not explosive, but deeply respectful. Some clapped. Some nodded. A few wiped tears. She walked off stage and into the hallway without looking back. Calder stayed seated. He didn't follow her. He didn't text. He simply sat there, replaying every line. Not out of guilt, but out of awareness. That woman was no longer his wife. She was something far bigger now. The December wind greeted her like an old friend. Crisp, sharp, clean. Seraphine pulled her coat tighter and stood beneath the amber streetlight beside the venue. She didn't want applause. She didn't need comfort. She wanted air. She looked up, exhaled, and whispered to no one. I said what needed to be said. Her phone buzzed. Mireille, you handled that with grace. You good? She replied simply, Seraphine, I'm okay, just breathing. But when she slid the phone into her pocket, she felt another presence behind her. Not heavy, not invasive, familiar. She didn't turn. She already knew. I wasn't going to come, Calder said quietly. Still, she didn't face him. But you did, she said. Silence sat between them. He walked forward until they stood side by side. No eye contact, no reaching, just the shared space of two people with too much history and not enough present. You didn't mention my name, he said. She finally looked at him. I didn't have to. He chuckled under his breath, but there was no humor. I guess I've earned that. Seraphine's voice was calm. It's not about earning, it's about clarity. He turned toward her now, fully. The night framed her like a painting. You were incredible, he said. Strong, clear, everything I remember, but sharper now. You didn't remember when it mattered, she said. And that's what changed me. He swallowed. The air was cold, but the sting in his throat wasn't weather. I've thought about what I'd say to you if I ever got the chance. You've had chances, Calder. You chose silence too. He nodded. I didn't think you wanted to hear me. I didn't, she said. But I deserve to. That stopped him. Do you want to talk now? He asked. She thought for a moment. Then, not to rehash the past, but maybe to draw the line better, not far, just enough to escape the eyes of the venue and the weight of their past. They ended up in front of a closed coffee shop, the kind with fairy lights, still hanging from the awning and holiday specials drawn in chalk. I hurt you, he said, not because I stopped loving you, but because I loved myself too little to protect what mattered. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. He looked down, and it's probably 10 years too late. She nodded, but not wasted, just misaligned. He took a breath. I don't expect you to forgive me. I already did, she said. That stunned him. I forgave you the day I signed the divorce papers. Forgiveness isn't reconciliation, Calder, it's release. I needed to breathe. And now? He asked, carefully. She faced him directly. Now, I raise our daughter. I love her wholly. I show her how to speak, how to walk away, how to value herself, and I protect that peace. Even from you, if I have to. Calder closed his eyes for a moment. Then, with unexpected grace, he nodded. You won't have to. He pulled something from his coat. A folded paper. Not legal, not grand. A handwritten letter. For her, he said. I won't text, I won't call. But if she asks, or when you think she's ready, I want her to know I'm learning. Seraphine accepted it with a slow nod. You don't get credit for that. I'm not asking for any, he replied. Good, she said. Because healing isn't performance. They stood again in silence. Cars passed. Holiday lights flickered in windows. Somewhere, wind chimes sang a faint song. Then she looked at him one final time. You should leave first, she said. Why? Because I'm staying in this piece. You don't get to walk away and own the last moment. He understood. He smiled, one filled with regret and respect. I hope she grows up to be like you. She already is, Seraphine whispered. Calder walked away. No hug, no promises, just distance. Like it should have been long ago. Seraphine remained, under that soft light, with a folded letter in one pocket, and her voice finally steady inside her chest. And for the first time in years, the wind didn't chill her. It lifted her. 3 days after the event, the house smelled like cinnamon and fresh linen. Seraphine stood barefoot in the kitchen, her curls tied up, a playlist humming low through the speakers. It wasn't a perfect morning, but it was hers. Mom, a little voice flew down the hallway. Where's the tinsel? Top shelf, she called back. Use your step stool. Leora sprinted across the living room, her socks mismatched, arms full of string lights. Don't break anything, Seraphine added. I'm decorating like a boss, Leora yelled. Seraphine smiled to herself. Her daughter didn't need a perfect tree. She needed freedom. They were decorating late this year. After everything, the memories, the event, the brief exchange with Calder, Seraphine had needed a pause. Not to reflect, to choose. She hung ornaments slowly, handmade ones from when Leora was 3. Others collected over the years. No themes, no perfection, just memories that belonged only to them. As she added the last ornament, a small dove with a cracked wing, her phone vibrated. A message from Mireille. Mireille, hope the post-event emotions are settling. Also, check your front porch. Seraphine raised a brow. She walked to the door, still holding a garland, and opened it. There sat a box, wrapped in brown paper, tied with red string. No label, no name. Inside, she found 2 things. Because you reminded us all that peace isn't given. It's chosen, no name. But she knew it was Mireille, and somehow it meant more without a signature. Later that afternoon, Leora insisted on hot cocoa and movies. The classics, the ones with claymation and dramatic sound effects and wooden dialogue. They curled up on the couch. The fire crackled. Outside, soft flurries danced like quiet applause. Seraphine looked down at her daughter. I'm proud of you, she said. For what? For being joyful. Leora grinned, chocolate on her upper lip. You taught me that. That evening the doorbell rang again. A courier stood outside, holding a red envelope. For Miss Seraphine Elouan, he said. Signature required. She signed. Leora peeked from behind the door. Is it from Santa? Seraphine opened it slowly. It wasn't from Calder. It was from the city's Cultural Affairs office. Inside, an invitation. You are cordially invited to the Holiday Honors Gala in recognition of community impact, December 24th, Hotel All-In Ballroom, 6 p.m. She blinked. They wanted her there, not as a guest, as an honoree. The next morning, Mireille called. You didn't think I'd let them forget your name after that speech, did you? I didn't expect it to matter, Seraphine said honestly. Oh, honey. It didn't just matter. It moved people. Seraphine paced slowly. I don't know what to wear. Then let me help you. Mireille paused, then added, and I think you should bring your daughter. She's 5. She's brilliant. She's part of your legacy. She belongs in that room too. Seraphine held the phone close. Thank you, she whispered. That evening, Leora twirled in a pale gold dress. I look like a sparkler. You look like light itself, Seraphine said. Her own dress was simple, long black with soft sleeves and a low back. Her hair coiled like waves at the nape of her neck. As they prepared to leave, Leora looked up. Will Dad be there? Seraphine knelt. I don't know. If he is, can I still be happy? That question broke her a little. You can always be happy, she said. No one decides that for you, even if he says sorry, even then. Leora nodded once. Okay. They stepped outside into snowlight. Seraphine didn't know what the evening would hold. Recognition, awkward reunions, maybe nothing. But she walked forward with Leora beside her, not to prove anything, to live, to celebrate what survived. And for the first time, her breath didn't fog with anxiety. It steamed with purpose. The All-In Ballroom shimmered like an ice palace. Strings of soft golden lights ran along the high-beamed ceilings. The chandeliers, dimmed just enough, left everything bathed in candlelight and quiet awe. Seraphine stepped inside with Leora's hand wrapped tightly in hers. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor as heads turned, not because she wore something showy or extravagant, but because she looked sure. It was the first time in years she walked into a room without shrinking. Beside her, Leora whispered, Mom, everyone's staring. They're seeing you too, Seraphine said with a smile. That's a good thing. Mireille met them halfway through the lobby, wearing emerald velvet and a grin that could cut through shame. You're here, she breathed. You look powerful. You said it wasn't about power. It's not. But your presence feels like it anyway. Mireille turned to Leora. And look at you, Miss Golden Sparkle. Leora gave a bashful curtsy. A volunteer approached them and handed Seraphine a small program. Her name was listed. Final honoree of the evening. Last on the run of show. Mireille leaned in. They saved you for the end. You're the quiet crescendo. Dinner came first. 4 courses. Too formal for a child. But Leora sat up straight and made faces at the fancy vegetables when no one was looking. She placed her napkin in her lap, like her mother taught her. Seraphine kept her focus on the stage until she heard a voice behind her. "Is this seat taken?" She turned. Calder, wearing a deep grey suit, no tie. His expression unreadable. Hands in his pockets. But the vulnerability in his eyes softened everything. Seraphine stared for a long moment, then nodded once. He sat beside Leora, who offered him a breadstick. He took it, smiling faintly. "I heard about the honor," he said softly to Seraphine. "You deserve it." She didn't thank him. Not yet. During dessert, a video played overhead. Footage from the community event. Images of the night. Seraphine stood on that platform and spoke without notes, without fear. She watched herself on screen, the way her chin stayed high even when her voice shook. The crowd had quieted that night, not because she spoke loud, but because she spoke truth. When the video ended, the MC returned to the mic. "Our final honoree of the night, Seraphine Elouan. For her resilience, grace, and courage to lead without title, applause." A few people stood. Leora clapped louder than anyone. Seraphine stood, heart pounding. Not from nerves, from recognition, not from them, from herself. The walk to the podium was slow and steady. She didn't touch her notes. She didn't need them. "My name is Seraphine," she began, voice clear, "and I didn't know what would happen when I stepped up on that stage days ago. I wasn't expecting change. I was trying to protect my child from silence." She paused. Silence is easy. It's heavy, but easy. Speaking costs something, but it also gives something back. People listened. No clinking of forks. No murmurs. Just breath held still. I didn't grow up imagining I'd need to fight to be seen. I didn't plan for motherhood to come with rejection. I didn't plan to build my life twice. She looked down at Leora, who was mouthing every word from memory. "But I'm learning that healing doesn't look like applause, or validation, or revenge. Healing looks like building new tables when doors close. It looks like showing your child they're worth being proud of, even when the world doesn't clap." Applause rose again. Fuller now. "I accept this honor not because I did something extraordinary, but because I chose peace, and I didn't back down from it." The standing ovation hit before she even stepped off the stage, and in the front row, Calder was already standing. Later, as people mingled and the room thinned out, Calder approached her again. "I saw you tonight," he said, not for the first time. But clearly, Seraphine didn't look away. "I didn't need you to see me, Calder." "I know." He stood awkwardly for a second, then added, "Can I walk you both to the car?" She hesitated, then nodded once. Outside, snow was still falling, thicker now, sticking to shoulders and hair. Leora ran ahead, twirling under the streetlights. Calder watched her. "She's something," he said softly. "She always was," Seraphine said. "You weren't there." "I'm here now." She looked at him, eyes sharp. "You don't get a ribbon for being late to the truth." He lowered his gaze. "I'm not asking for a ribbon." She opened the car door, buckled Leora in. Then she turned. "If you're here to stay, you show up without expectations. I will." "Not for me," she said. "For her. I understand." Seraphine paused, snow in her lashes. "We'll see." That night, back home, Seraphine tucked Leora in. "Mom." "Yes, love. Are you happy?" Seraphine brushed back her hair. "I'm not waiting for happiness anymore," she said. "I'm living in it when I can. And tonight?" Tonight was enough. Leora nodded, already drifting. Seraphine sat by the window afterward, sipping tea. No texts, no calls, no doubt. Just peace. The kind she had built herself. The kind no man, no gala, no apology could ever grant her. And that was enough. The next morning felt slower than usual. Not quiet, just slower. Seraphine stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a warm mug. The same mug she'd used for years, chipped at the rim but familiar. Leora was humming to herself at the table, feet swinging, drawing something with glitter markers. Calder's message still hadn't come. She wasn't expecting one. But she noticed its absence. The night before hadn't left her buzzing or empty. It left her aware. Of her growth. Of her child. Of how far she'd come with no hand to steady her. That truth didn't need a sequel. But she knew Calder would try to write one. And he did. There was a knock at the door. Seraphine moved cautiously, peeking through the peephole. Calder, holding a book, and something else in a brown paper bag. She opened the door partway. "You're early." "I know," he said. "I wanted to catch you before the day got ahead of us." She didn't move aside. "I brought breakfast," he added. "No expectations. I figured we could eat, talk. If not, I'll leave it." Leora's voice rang out behind her. "Is it waffles?" Seraphine glanced back, then sighed. "Waffles and apple slices," Calder confirmed. "With cinnamon." "Like you made years ago." Seraphine opened the door fully. "You remember that?" she asked. "I remember everything," he said. "I just stopped acting like I did." They sat at the small table, the same one where Seraphine had written job, applications, sorted bills, and taught Leora how to read sight words. Calder didn't try to take the seat closest to Leora. He waited for her to choose. Leora climbed onto her chair, wide-eyed at the sight of whipped cream and syrup. "Did you make this?" "I did," Calder said. "You cook now?" He smiled faintly. "I'm learning. Mostly to make up for how I never helped before." Seraphine watched him from across the table, saying nothing. When breakfast ended, Leora went back to her glitter markers. Calder cleared his throat. "Can we talk?" "You're already here," Seraphine replied. "I meant without her ears. She hears more than people think. You of all people should know that by now." He nodded. "Then I'll speak with care." Seraphine leaned back slightly. "Go ahead." "I want to ask for your forgiveness," he said. "Not because I think I've earned it, but because I can't pretend I didn't do damage. I made choices that made you small. I handed you silence and called it peace. And I watched you shrink instead of standing beside you." Seraphine's voice was even. "You didn't just watch. You benefited." He didn't flinch. "I know." She studied him. "Then what do you want now?" "A chance to support you. To be here. For Leora. For whatever you'll let me be part of." "I'm not offering redemption arcs," Seraphine said. "This isn't a novel. There's no clear ending." "I'm not asking for an ending," he said. "I'm asking for a beginning, even if it's small." Seraphine crossed her arms. "I've spent 5 years rebuilding from ashes you helped pour gasoline on. You don't get to walk in and repaint the walls." "I'm not here to repaint," he said. "I'm here to hold a ladder if you ask." She paused. Leora ran over just then, tugging Seraphine's sleeve. "Can I show him my drawing?" Seraphine hesitated, then nodded once. Leora held up the paper. A stick-figure family. 3 people. One had glasses, like Seraphine. One had a tall hat and a square jaw. Calder looked at it slowly. "Is this me?" he asked. Leora shrugged. "I don't know. You weren't around when I started." She ran back to the table, leaving silence behind. Seraphine stood. "I need to get ready for work." Calder stood too. "Of course." She walked him to the door. Before leaving, he handed her the book he'd brought. "It's for Leora. Stories about girls who make their own way." She took it, fingers brushing his unintentionally. He left without asking for anything more. At the architecture firm later that day, Seraphine stood in front of a model for a new community project. A public library, clean lines, natural light, accessible space. She'd fought for months to get the proposal moved to the front of the board's priorities. Now it was real. The senior partner, Nina Vance, stepped beside her. You'll be lead on this. Seraphine blinked. Excuse me. You earned it, Nina said. That speech you gave? Half our donors brought it up this morning. You gave them something to believe in. And not just as a mother, as a builder. Seraphine breathed in, then nodded. Thank you. I'm not doing you a favor, Nina said. You are already qualified. Now the world finally sees it. Later, during lunch, Seraphine sat in the break room when her phone buzzed. A message from Calder. Thank you for today. I'll respect whatever pace you need, but I'll keep showing up. She didn't reply. She didn't delete it either. That night, after putting Leora to bed, Seraphine found the book Calder left. It had a handwritten note tucked inside the cover. I failed to be the kind of story you could tell proudly, but I'm not done trying to be a different chapter. She folded the note and placed it in her drawer, not out of sentiment, but because accountability deserved to be documented too. She stepped out onto the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, tea in hand. Below, the city lights blinked. A quiet hum of December wind moved through the trees. She didn't feel alone, not because of Calder, but because peace had become a place she carried, not one she waited to find. A week passed. Calder didn't flood Seraphine's phone. No long messages, no flowers, no sudden pop-ins. He sent one message a day. Short, thoughtful, a memory, a moment, a simple "I'm still here." She didn't respond, but she read every single one. One morning, Leora came downstairs in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Mom, can Dad come to the park with us today? Seraphine paused, teacup halfway to her lips. She met her daughter's gaze. Why? Leora shrugged. Because he's trying. Seraphine set the cup down. You know you're allowed to feel both happy and unsure, right? Leora nodded. I know. But I want to see what happens when he keeps trying. Seraphine didn't answer right away. She stared out the window at the bare trees. Then she picked up her phone and typed a message. We're going to Kensington Park at 4. You're welcome to join. No emoji. No opening. No closing. 15 minutes later, Calder responded, Thank you. I'll be there. At the park, Leora took off running toward the swings. The air was brisk, but the sun stayed out just long enough to warm the benches. Calder arrived 5 minutes early. He looked unsure of where to stand, so Seraphine nodded toward the empty seat beside her. He sat. For a while, they watched in silence. She's fast, he said. She's light on her feet, Seraphine replied. No weight holding her down. He nodded, absorbing the meaning behind her words. I didn't come here to prove anything, he said. Good, Seraphine said, because proving things often hides the truth. I just wanted her to see me show up without being asked. She's watching. She always is. They sat for another moment. I thought love meant showing strength, he said quietly. Holding everything together, taking care of everything. It's not, Seraphine said. It's being there. Especially when things fall apart. Calder exhaled. I didn't know how to be soft. You knew how, she said. You chose not to. He didn't argue. Instead, he stood and jogged toward Leora, offering to push her on the swing. She hesitated, then grinned and nodded. Her laughter rang through the park. Seraphine didn't smile, but she didn't stop watching. The next weekend, Leora had a school project, Family Heritage Day. She had to bring something that represented her roots. I want to bring Mom's old photo album, she said. And maybe Dad can bring the Italian cookbook he said his nonna used. Seraphine blinked. You've never asked to bring him into a project before. Leora shrugged. I didn't think he'd show up. Do you think he will now? Leora nodded. I hope so. Calder arrived that night, holding a tattered red cookbook. He smiled sheepishly. It smells like garlic and glue. Leora beamed. Perfect. Together, the three of them sat at the table. Leora pasting photos, Seraphine trimming labels, Calder translating recipes written in cursive Italian. It was not a reunion. It was not repair. It was cooperation, and it was enough. Later that week, Seraphine got a call. Mireille, again. There's a seat opening on the city's Cultural Preservation Board, she said. I submitted your name. Seraphine's eyebrows lifted. You didn't ask me. I didn't need to. You're ready. You belong in rooms where decisions are made, not just implemented. Seraphine hesitated. I'm not sure I have time. You do, Mireille said, because you're no longer spending time shrinking. Seraphine smiled, just a little. I'll consider it. Good. Because they already called to schedule your interview. That weekend, Leora had a mini recital at her music class. She played 2 songs on the keyboard, both short, both slightly off-key, but played with pride. Seraphine sat in the front row. So did Calder. Afterward, they met her at the juice table. You played beautifully, Calder said. Leora giggled. I messed up the middle. That's the best part, he said. It sounded human. Seraphine tilted her head. Since when do you like imperfections? Calder met her gaze. Since I learned perfection makes people disappear. They left the recital together. Outside, snow started falling again. Not heavy, just enough to dust their coats. Calder helped Leora into the back seat, then stood by the passenger side. Would it be all right if I rode back with you? Seraphine hesitated, then unlocked the door. On the way home, Leora slept in the back. Calder looked over at Seraphine. I miss your mind. She looked at him sideways. Not my body. I miss your body like a fool, he said honestly. But your mind, I never appreciated it fully. You asked good questions. You noticed what I missed. You called out things I was too proud to admit. And you ignored most of it. I regret that more than I can say. She pulled into the driveway. Before stepping out, he said, I want to keep showing up, but I won't ask you to meet me halfway. I'll walk the full length. You just have to let me stand near the door. She didn't answer. Not right away, but she didn't tell him to leave either. A few days later, Seraphine stood in front of the city's Cultural Preservation Board for her interview. She wore navy, no jewelry, her natural curls pinned back. No flair, just presence. The panel asked questions about design, accessibility, history, and public trust. She answered calmly. Then they asked one final question. What motivates you to serve on this board? She paused, thought of her daughter, of the home she built from hurt, of the kitchen table with glitter stains, of the fundraiser, the ballroom, the swing set, of the quiet peace earned after years of being silenced. My motivation is simple, she said. I believe in rebuilding, not from scratch, but from what remains. I want to help preserve what matters, not just in buildings, but in people. They nodded. They thanked her. As she stepped out, her phone buzzed. Calder again, rooting for you. No matter what. No pressure, no ask. Just presence. Seraphine stared at the message, then typed 2 words, thank you. It wasn't a door, but it was a crack in one. The first snowfall that stuck covered the neighborhood in quiet white. Seraphine stood at the window of her living room, watching the flakes gather on the railing. Behind her, the fireplace cracked low. Leora was sprawled on the rug with colored pencils and her favorite coloring book, humming off-key. It was peaceful, until a soft knock came at the door. Seraphine opened it to find Calder, gloved, scarfed, holding 2 coffee cups and a pastry box. She raised an eyebrow. Bribery? Neutral offering, he said. One has almond milk, no sugar. Other one's for me. He held them out. She took the correct one without saying thank you. Do I get to come in? He asked. She stepped aside. Leave your expectations at the door. I already did, he said, brushing off his boots. They sat across from each other, not too close, not too far. Leora waved at him from the floor. Hi, Dad. He grinned. Hey, Sparkle Bug. She went back to coloring. Seraphine sipped her coffee. Why are you here? I told you, Calder said. I'll keep showing up, quietly, consistently. You say that, but consistency isn't a word that ever meant anything to you before. I'm learning new definitions. She leaned back. Of fatherhood, of manhood, he said. Fatherhood is part of that. He set the pastry box on the table. You can eat first, or yell first, or both. She blinked. I'm not going to yell. I wouldn't blame you. I'm past blaming, she said. I'm protecting. From me? From old patterns. He nodded, accepting that. I read a book, he said. She blinked again. What? A book. A real one. No summaries, no audio. Words on paper. What book? What happened to you? Her eyebrows lifted. About trauma, he said, and the way it shapes people, the way we survive. She studied him for a long time. Why that book? Because I wanted to understand how I missed the signs. Yours, mine, Leora's. Seraphine didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked, Did you learn anything? He leaned forward. Yes. That love doesn't cancel pain. And if you ignore pain long enough, it teaches everyone around you that love doesn't matter. A long pause stretched between them. Then, Seraphine spoke. I still don't know what I want from you. You don't owe me certainty. I don't want Leora thinking this means we're getting back together. I know. I don't want you confusing kindness for closure. I won't. I'm still angry sometimes. Good. And sad. He nodded. Same. I'm also not lonely. His gaze softened. You shouldn't be. Because I built this. I know you did. Another silence. Then Seraphine stood and walked to the window. Outside, a few neighborhood kids were building a lopsided snowman. Have you told your mother yet? She asked. He didn't pretend not to know what she meant. She knows I've changed, he said. She doesn't like it. Because it doesn't center her. She's lost control. She never had control, Seraphine said. You gave it to her. I know. And you let her shame me while I was carrying your child. His jaw tensed. I've replayed that memory, more than you'll ever know. And did you realize how loud silence is during betrayal? Yes. She turned to face him. You can't fix the past. I don't want to, he said. I want to do right with the present. She searched his face. You won't live here again. I didn't ask. We're not a family in the way you remember. I wouldn't ask for what I broke. Then why are you still here? He stood, walked to the window too. Because I believe in repair, not replacement, not reunion. Just responsible presence. She folded her arms. Presence, without pressure. He nodded. Without ego, without agenda. She studied him a moment longer, then asked softly, Would you have stayed this time if I hadn't walked away? His answer was quiet. No. There it was. The honesty, the bruise and the balm. Seraphine turned away. Leora had moved on to her second coloring page. Her tongue stuck out in concentration. She doesn't draw houses with fathers in them, Seraphine said. Calder blinked. She always draws me. A son. A heart, but never a second adult. His throat tightened. I don't want to force a correction, Seraphine continued. I want to offer an option. He walked over, crouched beside Leora. What are you drawing, kiddo? A house with a porch. Can I be the porch? She looked up. What? Not the house, not the heart, just the part that helps you walk in. The part you can sit on when you're thinking. She tilted her head. Okay. But you have to be brown. Deal. She handed him a crayon. He colored quietly beside her. And Seraphine, finally, let her shoulders drop. A little. Weeks passed. Not with grand gestures, but with consistent steps. Calder showed up on Sundays with groceries and no agenda. Sometimes he stayed for dinner. Sometimes he left after unpacking bags. He didn't ask questions when Seraphine needed space. He didn't hover when Leora wanted his attention. He learned to color within the lines, literally and metaphorically. He met her teachers, attended the school's winter showcase, cheered the loudest when she walked across the stage in her gold tulle dress, holding a paper snowflake. Seraphine noticed, not because he announced his presence, but because he stopped explaining his intentions and started living them. One Thursday, Seraphine hosted a small book club in her living room. 5 women, tea mugs, and a pile of sticky noted paperbacks. Calder picked Leora up from school that day and took her for pizza and library time. He returned just as the group was ending. He stayed near the doorway, holding Leora's jacket. The women noticed, but Seraphine didn't offer an explanation, because she didn't owe one. He was here, not as her man, as her child's father, as someone repairing his reflection, and that was enough for now. That night, after Leora had fallen asleep with a flashlight under her blanket, Calder stayed back. He didn't sit. He stood in the hallway while Seraphine folded laundry. "I want to co-sign her education savings account," he said. Seraphine raised a brow. "I've already started one," she said. "I know. I want to add to it." She kept folding. "And I want to set up a foundation in her name, something small, local. Scholarships for little girls who remind me of her." Seraphine looked at him fully now. "Because guilt?" "Because growth," he said. "Do it in your own name," she said. He shook his head. "She's the legacy I'm proud of." A beat passed. Then Seraphine nodded once. "Fine, but I want transparency." "You'll have it." "And no press." "Of course." She handed him a folded towel. "You fold like a toddler." "I'll relearn." "You're 40. Then I'll relearn faster." She almost smiled. Saturday morning came soft and slow. Seraphine made pancakes, while Leora played DJ with her tiny speaker. Calder stood at the counter, chopping fruit. No need to direct him. He knew now where the cutting boards were, where the spoons went, how to wrap leftover batter. "Is this weird?" he asked suddenly. She glanced at him. "This, us, this rhythm." She shrugged. "It's peaceful." He looked over. "I've missed that. You missed me being peaceful. Not the work that got me here." He didn't argue. She appreciated that. Leora called from the hallway. "Can we go sledding today?" Seraphine turned. "We don't have a sled. I have one in the car," Calder said. Seraphine raised a brow. "You came prepared?" "I Googled what dads do in December." She rolled her eyes, but her voice softened. "Go get it." Later, at the park, Leora laughed so hard she fell off the sled and into the snowbank. Seraphine ran to her, heart thudding. But Calder was already there, helping her up, brushing snow from her hair. "No crying?" he asked. "Nope." She beamed. He gave her a high five. Seraphine watched from a distance, not with longing, but with a calm that came from knowing she could step back, and Leora would still be safe. That was the win. Not reunion, restoration. That night, Calder walked them to the door. "Want to come in?" Seraphine asked. He hesitated. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I'm offering presents, not promises. I'll take it." Inside, he helped Leora out of her jacket. She hugged him hard. "I love today." He smiled. "Me too." She ran off to change into pajamas. Seraphine turned to him. "You're good with her." "I want to be better. You're showing her that." He took a breath. "I meant what I said at the gala. I see you." Seraphine didn't blink. "And I hear you. I don't need to be your husband again," he said. "But I would be proud to be your friend." Her lips twitched. "Don't ruin it with labels." He laughed. "Okay." She looked around the quiet house. Her home. Her peace. "You know," she said, "I used to think healing meant being alone forever. What changed? I realized peace doesn't mean solitude. It means protection. Of your joy. Of your time. Of your boundaries." He nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For folding yourself smaller so Leora's heart could stay big." He swallowed hard. Seraphine walked him to the door. "Drive safe," she said. He opened the door, stepped into the cold, then turned back. "If one day I wanted more, could I ask?" She didn't smile, didn't soften, but she didn't shut the door. "You could ask," she said, "but your answer won't come from my mouth. It'll come from how my life feels with or without you in it." And with that, she closed the door gently behind him. Later, Seraphine curled up on the couch with her tea. The house was still. The snow fell quietly. Leora's soft breaths echoed down the hallway, and peace, earned, not granted, wrapped around Seraphine like a second skin. No grand finales, just truth, growth, and a new chapter written with steadier hands. That winter, no headlines covered her name. No magazine praised her grace. No wealth validated her value. But in one home, under one roof, peace lived. Seraphine didn't need a love story to finish her arc. She needed her own reflection, unafraid, undiminished, unforgotten. And Calder, he didn't redeem himself with money or regret. He redeemed himself by doing what so many fail to, showing up after. The damage, staying without applause, and listening without defense. Leora thrived, not because her parents got back together, but because the adults around her chose growth over ego. The lesson? Healing isn't always reunion. Love isn't always a second chance. And strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet decision to build peace, even when no one's watching. Thank you for watching Mr. Charles Stories, where every tale holds a mirror to love, loss, and the lessons in between. If this story touched something in you, share it with someone who needs quiet courage today. Comment below, what does peace look like for you? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the next story might sound like yours.